It's time to get down to business with me, Gulshan Sharma. The Centre has formed a high-powered committee to examine the reasons behind the crash of Air India flight AI-171. At least 274 lives have been lost. The Dreamliner fleet is also being examined. We are told the committee will submit its report in about 3 months from now. The Tata Group is repeatedly pointing out that 1 crore rupees will be given to the families of the victims. We have to ask a hard question. Is 1 crore rupee enough? Is it enough compensation for the families? The loss is immeasurable, no doubt about it. But is 1 crore rupee enough? And why is the Tata Group repeatedly emphasizing that the families will be given 1 crore rupees? I'll be joined by 2 guests, but before that, I want to play the bite of the CEO.
The Tata Group, our parent company, has announced that they will provide 1 crore rupees, or approximately 85,000 British pounds, to the families of each person who lost their life, and will cover the medical expenses of those injured.
I am now joined by Ms. Madhulika Bhaskar, who is an expert in the insurance business. Ma'am, my first question to you is 1 crore rupee compensation enough for the families of the victims?
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me for this function, for this interview. The point is, you cannot put any value to a life. So if you ask me whether 1 crore is enough, I mean, definitely not, but there is no upper limit that you can assign to it. So when you talk about insurance and these commercial aspects, it is, you are governed by some conventions, some laws, some regulations, market practices. So this 1 crore is somehow coming from what would be the airline's liability to each passenger. Of course, depends now whether it's a domestic passenger, this was an international flight, whether the flight is flying to the European country, to the US. Various factors define what would be an airline's liability to each passenger. So in this particular case, it will be the Montreal Convention that would be means applicable to all the passengers, and the compensation would be as per an SDR, as the called as the standard rate that has been fixed. So over here, it is around, you can say that a passenger would get somewhere between 1.5 to 2 crores Indian rupees, and SDR are about 150,000. So this is the promise which is coming from the backing or the insurance which the airline has already put in place.
I'm also now joined by Mr. H.P. Ranina, who is a senior advocate in the Supreme Court. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Is 1 crore rupee enough a compensation? Though the loss is immeasurable, there is a reason the group is emphasizing repeatedly through press releases, through campaigns on social media, and the CEO himself. 1 crore rupee is being paid. Why is that? Why is that statement important from a legal viewpoint?
No, this is purely voluntary. It's entirely for the company to decide what to pay, how much to pay. And this is an ex gratia amount which has been announced by the Tata Group of companies. This amount is something which comes as a windfall for them. Of course, most of the passengers would have their own insurance policies, so they would get covered under that as well. Possibly under the Insurance Act, they will get some money as travelers. So this, over and above that, they will get this 1 crore rupees from the Tata Group companies. This amount is something which is entirely dependent upon each individual. You cannot say whether it's good or bad, whether it's adequate or inadequate. It's entirely their choice. So I think this amount is fairly reasonable, having regard to the fact that most of the travelers are from India. And I may just mention to you that this amount will be free of tax. There's no tax implication involved because this would be treated as a capital receipt, which is outside the purview of taxation. So this amount they will get without having to pay any tax at all on this figure.
Let me rephrase the question. Is 1 crore rupee enough to reclaim the goodwill of passengers?
Well, that's a matter of opinion. But to win the goodwill of future passengers, the Air India will have to put its house in order. In order to regain confidence, they'll have to make sure that their security, their performance, and the fact that they look after the aircraft very well, and for their crew members, they'll have to prove that. That is a big challenge which Air India will now face. How to win over the confidence of travelers in this highly competitive world. So the question of 1 crore is not an issue at all. The issue is different. This is a wake-up call for both Tatas and for Singapore Airlines. Let's not forget Air India is partly owned by Singapore Airlines and partly by Tatas. And they will have to put their house in order. They have to put in all the safety safeguards. They'll have to win over the confidence that Air India is a safe carrier to fly in. And that will take time. That will take a lot of effort. So apart from the 1 crore that per passenger which Air India will invest in, they'll have to invest large amounts of money to improve their credibility, to ensure that their reputation is restored, that safety and security is a prime concern of Air India, and therefore they become one of the best airlines to fulfill the vision of J.R.D. Tata.
Let me come back to Ms. Madhulika. The Montreal Convention establishes the framework for airline liability over passenger deaths. That's the information that we have at the moment. And we have been told that it replaces the Warsaw Convention and simplifies litigation. Can you tell us what is the formula behind MC99 and how does it introduce a two-tier liability system that reduces the litigation?
This is what happens is they try to bring about a global, a global standard for these kind of crashes. So it depends where what kind of a ticket you have and where the airline is flying. So it is either governed by Montreal Convention or there is a European regulation. So it depends. According to that, it's a standard liability which an airline would be paying each passenger. And the idea behind this convention was to bring about a degree of uniformity across. So if you ask, it would be the same compensation that any airline would pay for a crash of this kind. So SDR 150, or it's a fraction. SDR is coming out of the big currencies. So there's a complex formula behind it. Approximately on date, it would be about 1.33. One SDR is 1.33 US dollars. So the compensation would work out somewhere around close to 150,000 SDRs. So yes, going by, if you ask me again with the value on life, no, I wouldn't say it's enough, but you need to bring about, some kind of uniformity across. And if you ask me, the track record of Air India has been fantastic compared to many other airlines. And this compensation what they are announcing is they are ready to pay it upfront before all legal liability is established. And, normally to pay a compensation through any kind of fund like this is a long drawn process, which with the airlines and they are trying to say is that they are ready to pay this upfront without waiting for any kind of documentation and paperwork. So that's the goodwill gesture that they have trying to express. So, do not focus so much on that 1 crore portion, but at least, look through it as to the kind of a goodwill and the other things that they are trying to offer. I empathize with whatever has happened, but yes, this is, you are in a risk-taking business. You are, airlines is the kind of business is unsafe. If you try to compare to the road accident victims, we hardly pay in lakhs. The compensation
Let me interrupt there, ma'am.
It's 2 lakhs. Sir.
See, everyone understands the risk involved when we are traveling, whether by road, rail, or through air. Everyone understands that, and which is why we have insurance as well. The point that I'm trying to make is there could be uniformity between the airlines, but an individual who becomes a victim of such a horrible crash and loses their lives, some of them could be earning maybe 1 crore a year, the other one could be making 100 crores a year. So is there any link between yearly income of a passenger who has lost his or her life and the compensation being given, whether through Montreal Convention or through other insurance companies?
Histories and other things that we have seen, yes, this is the minimum that the airline would pay upfront without anyone trying to go for a legal suit, etc. In case a passenger decides to take Air India to the court, the liability would be determined by the court depending on each one's is financial, etc. So you might find a few passengers who might take the airline to court also. We have seen it in the past, the Air India Kanishka loss and EP and VTEP and Bangalore crash. Yes, there are a few passengers who would take the airline to court. Then the legal liability would govern. But this is something that is standard that the airline would pay upfront without waiting for any kind of lawsuits or legal documentation.
You talked about lawsuits, and there's a reason behind we are raising this issue today. Let me once play the bite of Mr. Campbell again, and then I'll come to Mr. Ranina.
The Tata Group, our parent company, has announced that they will provide 1 crore rupees, or approximately 85,000 British pounds, to the families of each person who lost their life, and will cover the medical expenses of those injured.
To our knowledge, sir, this is at least the third time that officially the group has stated that 1 crore rupees will be given as ex gratia. Is it an attempt to avoid lawsuits?
No, I don't think so. It doesn't prevent a person from filing a lawsuit if it can be shown as an after investigation that there was negligence on the part of the airline concerned. A lawsuit can also be filed if it has been shown, for example, that there was a problem with the aircraft or the manufacturer of the engine, GE company. So lawsuit can also be filed against those persons in case the investigation shows that there was some defect in the aircraft which was responsible for this crash, or the engines failed and therefore GE is liable. So lawsuit is a totally independent issue. What Campbell has given is an ex gratia amount of 1 crore or 85,000 Great Britain pounds. But apart from that, they can always file a suit. Either if the airline can be shown to have been negligent, or the aircraft manufacturer has been shown to have any defects, or the engine manufacturer is known to have any defects. Those are separate issues altogether. And those lawsuits can be filed even in America. For example, if it's shown that Boeing was responsible for this crash.
A human error is found in case there's some problem with the engines or the aircraft. How do you distinguish the two scenarios?
Well, if it's a question of error on the part of the pilot or the crew members, that's a separate issue. Question is whether the airline can be held responsible for that because this is a human error. I think courts will take a very different view altogether. But if suppose there's a problem with the maintenance of the aircraft, if it can be shown that this crash took place because of lack of proper maintenance, then Air India can be sued as an airline. Similarly, if it can be shown that there was something wrong with the aircraft, then the Boeing company could be sued in America. And similarly, if something is wrong with the engine, then GE could be sued in America. These are all separate issues. Let's wait for the investigation to come to a final conclusion. It will take up a few months, maybe even a year. But that's when things will be very clear as to who was responsible for this attack. It can also be, for example, that there was a natural issue. For example, if there was a bird hit, as was one of the factors for the crash. Now, you cannot blame anybody for that. So in that case, a lawsuit would not lie.
Let me come back to Ms. Bhaskar again. Ma'am, does the Montreal Convention rid the airlines of their liability? Does it make life easier for the CEOs and the companies in case of such mishaps?
Yes. Even the passenger number is large. When you have a standard regulation governing the payout, you are reducing the legal liability cases. There would be many passengers who would accept the liability which is given upfront, because that is as per the market standards or the internationally practiced norms, that it what would be payout. Like as you're saying, if there is a fault that has been found out, even in that case, the Air India would first make this payment as they have offered it. The insurance company, Air India's insurance company, thereafter under subrogation rights, can take it up with Boeing or the engine manufacturer or whoever. So basically, the passenger gets his money upfront without going through all these lengthy litigation processes and fault finding and other things. The whole idea is that the buying insurance and making it easy for the passengers to get this sum upfront and quickly, because the time is also of essence over here. If it's an earning member or the whole family is being supported, the time is of essence. That upfront it gets something to start immediately.
Mr. Ranina, if you were the airline's lawyer today, what would you advise them?
Well, I would wait for the investigation to be completed. I don't think anybody can give any advice without the cause of the air crash being established beyond reasonable doubt. In law, it has to be established beyond reasonable doubt. And therefore, let's wait for the investigation.
Of course.
If I were an Air India lawyer, I would have nothing to do until the investigation is completed.
Of course. Everyone is waiting for that. And we expect that to happen in about 3 months from now. The black box has been found. My question is, in terms of strategy, in terms of public appearance, in terms of statements, what would you advise them?
In terms of appearance and statements, I would advise the management to immediately establish proper measures of security and safety, announce them to the public, be very transparent, tell the public exactly what lessons they've learned. This was an eye-opener. This was a wake-up call. What lessons have they learned from this crash? And what are they going to do about it to make sure that it does not happen again? That is what I would advise the Air India if I were their lawyer.
And what would be the timeline for that?
Well, immediately start the process immediately. Whatever may be the reason, they should take all factors into account, all possibilities into account, and then make sure that somehow enough security measures are taken to make sure that the aircraft is worthy, that the aircraft is absolutely safe to travel. Once that is established, once that is done, I think they should go public and immediately build enough confidence among the traveling public at large.
We cannot put a number to the value of a life, and at least 274 people have lost their lives in this tragic crash. For the moment, we will leave it at that. Ms. Bhaskar, Ms. Ranina, thank you for joining.